floor, please. But should we overrun by 5 minutes tonight, please do bear with me. So let me invite Kovini Musi to the stage. Kovini is the current risk manager of the so she's a CA. Mm-hmm. She has got experience related to JSE listed companies. She recently left Discovery Health, and I know that she is now with Deloitte. Thank you so much. Do join us. And I'd like to call on stage Vanessa Fairwall. So Vanessa has got a vast and broad experience that comes from multiple sectors. She's currently holding a role at AMSA as a technical risk manager, really overlooking the advisory services, the technical library, Center of Excellence, which entails, amongst others, thought leadership at AMSA. So she's the go-to person should you wish to talk about anything advisory, anything thought leadership, content development, governance framework related to strategy, risk and resilience, and so on and so forth. She has been involved in implementation of different phases of risk management across the board, really cycling back to the start and end of risk management cycle, from analyzing risk management maturity to conducting gap analysis, so on and so forth. And she's now also, spearheading the governance workshops on King 5. And I hope that you would have had a chance to comment, because we shared that draft earlier on in the month of Feb. So, having said so, let me quickly just grab my note. It's actually my laptop. And Tinashe, maybe I can be closer to them. So we've really delved deep into following what Prof said there on the governance frameworks that underpin effective risk management, and looking into financial planning, robust strategies that companies that are likely to survive need to have in place. So given that background, and I wanted to continue from where Prof ended in terms of the importance of anchoring our strategies on risk management. So with that, maybe starting off with thoughts on financial planning and investment, because companies nowadays are looking into building capabilities, and that goes to investing into internal capabilities, robust systems, agile systems that would be, they would be able to withstand, for lack of a better word, withstand and have the resilience necessary to guard against security attacks. We spoke of cyber attacks right now. So this all starts with a governance framework, right? It starts with structures being in place. It starts with having authorities that will support risk management. So what would be then, and I'm going to start with you, Vanessa, what would be your key elements of a strong governance framework that will be critical to managing investment risk?
So I think you've got to have the structure, and exactly how we spoke about moving away from the tick box, and I mean there's been so much said today. We have to have the structures to guide us, but we can't become rigid within those structures. We can have that as the sort of recipe book, but we still need to understand what we're actually doing, and be it following on from that, understanding our risk appetite, understanding who we are as an organization, the risks we are willing to take, be it from an investment perspective or just our general risks. We've talked a lot today as well about understanding the external as well as the internal. And that's a key part, our ISO 31000 risk process. Understanding that what can affect our organizations. And as you said, Prof, at the end, is being brave to question that. And we're only going to change that groupthink and get out of the tick box if we are brave enough to speak out. So I think having the governance framework and the guide is very, very important, and there's a lot of material or codes, standards, depending on your sector, if it's legislation or King 4 and King 5 coming. There's a lot of guidance out there that can help us with those governance frameworks, but the key thing is to get out of that tick box, the groupthink, being brave, but understanding our organizations and the environment in which we operate.
So taking that further, Kovini, because we want to move away from tick box exercises, how do we then help our governance systems internally to draw the right balance between taking risks and avoiding it, especially in such a volatile market?
I think we all in this room know how dynamic the environments that we operate in are, right? Things are changing constantly. From my experience, I think it is critical, like Vanessa said, and most of our speakers as well, to have that governance structure, to have your defined policies, your ERM framework. That's one component of it. But I think what's a more important component of it is you can have the best policies in the world, the best framework. But do you have the sort of ethical leadership and the brave leadership to actually question those things, to change things when they don't make sense? Do you have a risk appetite statement that talks about zero tolerance for example, non-compliance towards laws and regulations? In my experience, I find that sometimes, on paper, everything is really great and we have all the processes, but there's a level of bravery and courage that comes with, like you said, speaking out, questioning the status quo, which is probably one of the most difficult things for anyone who's been in risk, to be that odd one out, to stand up and say, I don't believe in this, or we're missing these particular risks, let's add them to the register. And I think, to support that, what is very important and something that I'm really passionate about is creating psychological safety within your environment to allow those policies to work the way they should, and to allow people the freedom to be able to speak up and speak out on things that don't make sense.
Awesome. So once I'm still with you there, Kovini, how would you exemplify that using some of practical scenarios where governance frameworks would have effectively mitigated against risk, particularly unpredictable events, as we've been speaking with Prof there? What are those practical scenarios where that would have happened effectively, especially that what we know as risk officials is that governments and private sector boards, executives, they would want to pin the money to where it matters most, and to strategies that are going to be generating income and revenue, and very little investment goes to risk or preventative mechanisms that are going to be set up to somehow tailor-make our internal capabilities to withstand unpredictable risk. So what are those practical examples that you can share?
I think practical, it's just about having the right strategy, because your strategy defines the type of appetite that you're willing to take up, and to make sure that you're able to balance your objectives from a strategy perspective together with your risk objectives, and make sure that there's some sweet spot in there, whilst still maintaining the level of compliance that is required.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Yvonne, as well, is understanding that balance between your short-term and long-term goals and what you're trying to achieve, and that creation of value in your organization, as well as the protection of value. So it's about creating those opportunities as well as mitigating and managing the losses. And then other practical aspects, as we've chatted today as well, is leveraging that technology and the information that we've got at hand as well, which that then opens the whole another can of worms of AI and the topics that we've discussed today. But yeah, just really using that to stay informed and understand that balance of creating value and protecting value.
Awesome. And I suppose they make up the two blocks that each of us wants to live here with in terms of knowing the actual practical tools that will enhance how we do our work back at as we go back to our organizations. And I just wanted to maybe pull in the issue around transparency within governance frameworks in responding to risk. How important do you think that is to embed transparency into organizational governance framework in mitigating against risk?
I think it's everything. Transparency is, it underpins culture. It is something that we always talk about the tone at the top, and I speak about that a lot because it literally flows downwards. If you've got a leadership team that encourages that transparency, then you're talking about a more mature risk operating model, which is where everyone wants to be, where there shouldn't be fear if you need to raise something, you shouldn't have fear of being fired when you raising an issue.
Yeah.
And I think that transparency is really the key to getting risk management reporting accurate and complete, because people are going to come to you with risks from all over, and you look at your final risk report, you're going to have a holistic view of everything that's happening. And I think as a leadership team, you should want to know, as terrible as things are, you should want to know than rather not know. And I think having that culture of transparency at the top, filtering down, is what supports that.
I think there's no space for autocratic leadership anymore. It'll stifle agility, it'll stifle the resilience, and we really all need to be a team working for the good of our organization, our people, our life psychological wellness, and so on. And yeah, we just can't have that leadership that's just so hierarchical. Yes, we have our delegations of authority and that governance structure, but we really, transparency, it's so important, and it's that culture is one of the most difficult things to achieve. It's easy to write our frameworks and issue our reports and do our risk assessments and so on, but that's just the paper. It's not the culture and the behavior and the true value.
Yeah. How do we live these key principles in ensuring that governance structures that we have in place become effective? How do we live those? Because you speak of written codes, codified policies, and which is simple to do, quite easy, but it's living that it has become a bit of a struggle for most of us. How do we live those?
And I'll relate it back to our children. Being a dripping tap and just pleases, thank yous, share, don't be nasty to your sister. We've got to be repetitive in our organizations in preaching the value of risk management, what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and being that dripping tap on an ongoing basis. It's not just about one presentation to the board and then yes or no they've got it or not. We can't just then leave it up to our audit reports at the end of the business cycle and hope that we have clean findings. I think a lot of it is just this ongoing awareness building, ongoing sort of preaching of value, for use of a better word, and just really using every engagement, and no matter what, if you're a practitioner or professional or CRO, whatever level you are, every engagement, be it with leadership or your colleagues, to promote the value of good governance and risk management, and being proactive as well.
Yeah. Speaking of proactiveness, we are future oriented as a discipline of risk management, and in our governance setup, it's very rare that you find
policies and regulations that are looking into the future. Most of them are underscored by previous experiences and interactions in the past that would utilize as the basis for us to change or even introduce certain laws, to avoid recurrence of previous negative experiences. So being future oriented, we speak of foresight. How do we incorporate that into governance frameworks such that we embed foresight and forward thinking into governance structures? How do we go about that? What are your thoughts on that, Kobini?
I think definitely starting with an emerging risk list, right? So emerging risk defined as greater than 1 year, less than 5 years. For example, the NHI policy in South Africa would be an emerging risk at this point, where the impact could be seen beyond the year and less than 5 years. So I think it's important to keep that on our radar and constantly be looking at media reports and looking at other updates. And then closely linked to that as well is the capability around AI predictability analytics, which I think is really trending at this point in terms of what could happen in the future, the use of scenario testing, the use of scenario planning. And I think also diversity of thinking is so important today in corporates, right? The fact that you want to bring different people to the table, you want to give different people a seat at the table, and you want to bring in diverse views, because that's really how you're going to be able to look forward and say, wow, I didn't think of that, or this could become a problem in 2 years' time, and let's start putting it onto our risk profile or register and start tracking it accordingly.
Awesome. Kobini, you mentioned AI. How do we then use that? I think many of us use it for many different reasons.
Yes.
I for one have used it. I rely on it a lot for research purposes. But amongst the top 5 risks that the World Economic Forum have raised is disinformation and misinformation. How do we navigate that risk, especially in relying on AI and predictive data that is sourced from OpenAI?
As far as I know, there isn't really laws to guide AI in South Africa at present. I think we rely on some of the international laws, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the first challenge. We need to have a law in place that can really support this and drive it forward in terms of compliance. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Vanessa.
I was talking to someone the other day about it, and the metaphor of when you're using your GPS to get somewhere that you're not sure of, you can't blindly follow it.
Yeah.
You have to have some idea of where you're going. Like, I live in the Western Cape. You can take one wrong turn off the N2 and you are in Khayelitsha, okay? Or you take one wrong turn on the N7 and you're now heading up towards Springbok, okay? So you still have to have some idea of where you're going. And I think the use of AI and the responsible use, and I use it all the time in research as well, is still having an idea what you're looking for, and not just a complete copy and paste. And I mean, Prof, in your academic context as well, and we've been seeing it in our CRM Prof exam, is the use of blind use of AI and just copy paste of information. Obviously, your data analytics, when you're looking for certain results, it's like that GPS. You still have to have some form of idea what you're looking for, and not blindly trusting.
And I think ethical AI is also quite topical, right? The bias that could be embedded into AI also needs to be considered. The ethics around that, are you using it for the purpose that you're actually meant to? Yeah.
Well, and also the same person I was talking to, and it's coming back to me now, is he mentioned the term hallucination, AI hallucination, where AI suddenly just starts going wrong. And if we're not aware of what the results should be looking like, we could end up with this sort of blind trust and incorrect information that's being used.
I think there's a lot we could take from that, especially us as risk managers, because we rely a lot on data, right? And it is this data that is likely to either enhance decision making or negate it, depending on the source. So very critical for us to incorporate into our thought process as we do our work. There's a growing regulatory expectation on ESG, sustainability, and we are seeing chief risk officers not really holding center in terms of taking full responsibility of ESG and knowing how to navigate the ESG landscape. What are some of your advice in terms of incorporating ESG fully into the risk radar? Because it has become one of the top risks now. I mean, climate change, which underpins some of the disastrous events that we've seen in South Africa.
I love the concept of it, but I think there's also elements of duplication when we talk about ESG, right? So the governance part of it is already the risk management. Those are things that are already in there. And then the social part of it is most companies already have a CSI, they already manage it, they already have processes. And then the economics, I believe, is maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. But a lot of people and specialists that I've spoken to say that it is trendy and there's a lot of duplication in ESG. And I think also just linked to that is identifying what is the best method to be able to monitor holistically. And from my research and my experience, that also links closely to the concept of GRC, which is very, very topical at this point. And moving away from silos, so that's governance, risk, compliance. It's almost a collaboration of all of those components together to give you a more streamlined approach and tons of benefits in terms of moving away from silos but working together to give more value-added reports. In terms of the economic part, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
I think from exactly as you say, so I'm going to sidestep the economic stuff first, but it's ESG, GRC, it's been very much a reporting, and in some cases a very laborious reporting tool as well. And I think so many organizations are stuck in this reporting burden and are not actually looking at the value. A lot of what we are reporting on from an ESG perspective is happening in our organizations already. So as you say, so we've got our economic metrics and indicators and reporting, we've got our social programs, we've got our governance programs. It's bringing it into a new umbrella, really. But a lot of what we've got in our organizations is already happening, but we get so blinded by the reporting burden that we forget about the actual practicalities of it. It's like combined assurance. Combined assurance is nothing new. It's a repackage to be more efficient at what we're doing. Yes, some lines have newer responsibilities, but I firmly believe ESG and GRC is adding value, or it needs to add value if we're not in this overwhelm of reporting. And maybe this is my personal disclaimer, not ERMS's view or my view, is we're almost coming full circle. We've had risk management, we've had ESG, GRC, we've tried to complicate these frameworks, and we're almost coming back to just integrate risk management in the organization using all of these. So yeah, but that's the personal view of me.
Awesome. So as we drill down to closure, just a bit of a few thoughts that goes to advise how organizations can strengthen their governance framework, especially to somehow proof against future eventualities that is likely to bring adversity to organizations.
I think it's also just equipping your governance, your risk teams with skilled individuals. I think that's a really key component. From my experience and also, the individuals that I mentor, there seems to be, this capacity constraints all around where you just can't either keep people or they don't want to come to the organization, or it's so stressful and there's so much overtime because there just isn't enough resources to do all the work that's there. So I think definitely it needs to be part of budgeting, it needs to be top of priority. If you really want to get the most value out of this entire risk management, governance, compliance process, it is about investing in resources, skilled resources. It is about partnering with UMSA. It is about attending your upskill courses that have been really insightful, and really starting with the bottom layer, which is just key and critical to everything, our resources and our assets.
Right. Vanessa,
Yeah, I think
your
just
last
to,
thoughts?
so something I get excited about is, it's not about, and I actually got the right wording we're about to publish an article through UMSA, is I've always said we can't predict the headline story, but if we understand the different impacts that we are vulnerable to in our organizations that can affect us, be it supply chain issues, financial issues, health issues, business interruption, and so on. The headline story, which I now know the correct word, is a convergent risk. Okay? So the headline story in layman's terms, we can't predict the COVID, the global recession of 2008, sorry. But the impacts are similar to our organizations.
Yeah.
So by understanding those and being ready for those, so almost like they're subset risks. When whatever the crazy zombies, whatever, asteroids, whatever it might be, Donald Trump now coming and living in Sandton, whatever the headline story is, understanding those impacts and the interrelatedness of those impacts and different events as they can affect us. And I agree with you on fighting. We in this tactical firefighting mode, that we do have capacity constraints, and if we've got the right skilled individuals using the technologies we've got to make us more time efficient, having the right level of skills, and as you touched on, the top down and the bottom up is very important in having that, getting that foresight in our organizations to manage those risks.
Awesome. I'm pretty happy to live here as a CRO, albeit I'm not. But I think those were really great insights coming through, very, very valuable. And I want to thank both of you for having spent some time with all of us here. A round of applause for them, please. So that's Govini together with Vanessa. So we will be having more time to interact with them as we go out for lunch break. But can I then take this moment just maybe to wrap up and thank all of you for having come through for this session. We'll be having more of these as the year progresses. I particularly want to acknowledge, of course, our speakers, Prof, and the two panelists, Tinashe, the sponsor for the event, and the sponsor for many other events to come. Not to forget a member of the board who has joined us here today, Toniso. Thank you so much for joining us. Toniso is a group CRO at JSE, known to all of us. So thank you. Colleagues, thank you so much. It was awesome to have you. I look forward to seeing you again in our events. Thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you. So lunch